Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
What I want to do in this third part of the series called Inconceivable is take a step back and look at the overarching story. Because if you think about it, our entire lives, not just the Christmas story, but our entire lives are inconceivable.
Today with Jeff Vines, pastor, apologist, and Bible teacher.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on Today with Jeff Vines. During this Christmas season, Pastor Jeff brings us a series around the events of that first Christmas. It's called Inconceivable. In this message, Pastor Jeff is reading from Isaiah chapter 9.
I'm in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 through 7. Let me read it to you. It goes like this, very famous Christmas passage. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. So a child is born, a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. Now the passage goes on, but just in that first section, there's something that's very rich. So far, we've gone down into the weeds of the Christmas story. We looked at Matthew chapter 1 and 2. We looked at the events surrounding the birth of Christ. We looked at the genealogy. What I want to do in this third part of the series called Inconceivable is take a step back and look at the overarching story. Because if you think about it, our entire lives, not just the Christmas story, but our entire lives are inconceivable. You know, one of the first gifts I got at Christmas wasn't quite a gift, I'll explain, but was a little Christmas puppy. You see a photo on the screen here. It's a full-blooded or bred collie. And we had collies my entire childhood, but this special collie on Christmas was such a great gift. But the problem is, I learned that I only got to keep it for 2 weeks. We were actually house-sitting it for somebody. So you can imagine how this went. I'm a young kid. I've got this beautiful puppy, my first puppy. I've fallen in love with this dog. And after about a week, it dawns on me, this puppy is leaving in 7 days, then 6 days, then 5 days, then 4 days. And every day I got closer to the puppy, I recognized I was getting closer to the end. I want you to think about something for a moment in the context of the Christmas story. There is a sense of loss that comes with life. There is a sense of loss that comes with life. It seems that we're always losing something. And it permeates everything. Robin and I, my wife, this past week, we decided to go on YouTube and watch an Andy Williams Christmas. Now, you'll only know what that is if you're 50 or above. Andy Williams was an iconic Christmas entertainer, and he would do these variety shows. Fantastic voice. But when CBS would produce these Christmas specials, Andy Williams would always bring his entire family onto the stage. His wife, I believe, French, would also sing a few songs. She was quite an entertainer herself. And then he had his 3 lovely kids. And over probably from 71 to 81, you saw these kids grow up. And he always involved his family. And they looked to be so together and so loving. And so I decided while Robin and I were watching this, you know, you do these kind of things. I thought, I wonder what happened to Andy Williams and his family, because we're going back to the 70s. So I did a little Google research. He was only married to this girl for about 9 years, and now he's estranged from his kids. That kind of made me depressed. Wow, Andy Williams? I mean, the together family, and now divorced, estranged from his kids, doesn't even know where they are? I began to think about my own Christmas memories. I thought about in my 20s living in Zimbabwe in this old farmhouse. And I would always put this boom box. Some of you might remember what that is, this rather large stereo that you'd carry around. You could either operate it through electricity or batteries, big double D batteries. And I would listen to Christmas music as I would work on my putt down the long hallway. And all those Christmas memories and all those Christmas songs reminded me of being married, but we didn't have kids. And I thought back to what life was like for Robin and me when we were in our 20s. And then I thought about Christmas in New Zealand And we would go up to a place called the Bay of Islands, a beautiful place. And in New Zealand, everybody takes Christmas and basically most of January off. So oftentimes you won't even have church during those seasons. So I would take my family to this beautiful place. And I thought about how Delaney and Siam, my kids, were very young, very small. I thought about Delaney riding on the golf buggy with me as I'd play around the golf. I thought back to Savannah, Georgia, when we were there for a couple of years, and I thought that was the year that my daughter wouldn't talk to me because I had told her we're moving from Savannah to this place called San Dimas, California. When your kids are young, sometimes you think, please stop talking. And then when they get a little older, it changes. Please say something, start talking. I remember Christmas past with my own mother and my brothers. I've mentioned many times the nostalgia of thinking about one of the greatest gifts I ever received was Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And again, you see a photo on the screen right now. A classic gift back in those days. But my brothers and I played. We got up at 5 a.m. and played that game for probably 3 or 4 hours. I visited my brothers just recently. I remember coming back and saying to my wife, I hadn't seen them in person for a while, and they look older. And the realization that they're going to die someday kind of hit me, especially my older brother, who doesn't look well at all. And I said to Robin, man, they look really old. And she replied, so do you. Now, I didn't think that was necessary, but it is true. I am getting older. Right now, I live with my grandkids, or I should say my grandkids are living with me. It's a temporary setup until their own house is finished. And I can't wait to see the looks on their faces, my grandchildren, on Christmas Day when they see the presents that Grandpa or Poppy has provided. But then at the same time, as you get older, you look at them and you realize there's going to be a day, and you never know how soon, that I'm not going to be around anymore. It may be 10 years, it may be 20, 30, it could be 2. You just don't know. And this is the point I'm trying to make. We all live with this sense that we're losing something at any given moment. There's a sense of loss that comes with life, that whatever we have, no matter how wonderful it is, it's temporary. And even though we try to block that out of our minds, down deep inside, we know it. Not only is there a sense of loss that comes with life, but there's a sense of frustration that comes with life as well. And since we know that loss is inevitable and that many of our dreams and hopes in this life will remain unrealized, how is it that we can live with a sense of joy knowing that those two clouds hang over us? Last Wednesday, so this would have been December 2023, a friend and I went over and I spoke at a Christmas event in Bel Air. And of course, that's not too far from Hollywood. And my friend and I began to talk about the wealth. It must be a different life, a different way of living. But I wonder if they're nostalgic too, if they live with a sense of loss, if they live knowing that life brings you a certain sense of frustration. I know I bring this up often because it's one of those quotes that has stayed with me for a long time. And it's Cynthia Heimel writing for the Village Voice in New York City. And she makes the comment, she says, I've known many of the Hollywood elite. She says they were so nice at first, when they first started out, blue-collar workers working their way through acting school. And then she says they got what they wanted. And I knew these people. I was friends with so many of them. And then they caught their big break. And when they caught their big break, they became mean. I kept reading. She says before they were stars, struggling to make ends meet and constantly playing the if-only game, waiting for their ship to come in, they were, and I quote, occasionally stressed, driven, frustrated, with common tendencies toward anger and even some hostility. That's how people are, she says, when they don't have what they think will make everything all right. They become irritable and discontent. She goes on to say when they finally get what they want, they become awful, unstable, angrier, manic, unhappier. And she's the lady that wrote the piece on the fact that when celebrities finally get what they're reaching for, they become hostile. And this is the quote I've kept. She says, celebrities, and I quote, were once perfectly pleasant human beings, but now their wrath is awful. They wanted fame, so they worked, pushed, and shoved. Yet the morning after each one of these became famous, they wanted to take an overdose. Because that giant thing that was going to make everything okay, make their lives bearable, give meaning and purpose to their lives, happened. And they were still them. The dissolution turned them howling and insufferable. And she says, I think when God really wants to play a rotten joke on you, he gives you what you so desperately wish for and then laughs when you realize you want to kill yourself. Now, that's tongue-in-cheek, I realize. She's not glorifying suicide. She's simply saying this is the way the human heart works. You work all of your life to get something you think is going to give you everything that you're looking for, and it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you got to decide how you're going to respond. Now, as a Christ follower, most of us would say, well, of course that makes sense. There is a need that the human heart in the human heart that nothing in the temporary world can fill. We know that. The real frustration happens when we thought by gaining something that it would solve all of our issues. And then we get it, and one of two things happens, and I think it's important. Number one, we get it, but we're still frustrated. And at that point, counselors tell us that we turn to coping mechanisms. Now, coping mechanisms are serious business in human psyche. Coping mechanisms are defined like this: constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to manage specific external and or internal demands that are appraised as taxing. In other words, I've got to find a way to deal with this devastating sense of loss. Every person develops coping mechanisms to deal with the disappointments of their lives. But there's one overarching reality that we all develop coping mechanisms to deal with, and that's this overarching issue of it's all going to end. Even if we do manage to grab hold of something, we can't keep it. It's like that Christmas puppy. It's nice while it lasts, but one day it will end. I always like to go to Time Magazine's article, December, at the end of every year, because they list famous people who have died. And this year's no different. The reason I bring this up is there's a part of us that think that celebrities and great athletes don't die, that they have superhuman powers and they've achieved so much, so surely their lives will not come to an end. So when we hear of their deaths, we're shocked, but I don't know why we're shocked, because all people go the same way. All of us have those heroes that we believe will never die. The question is, how can we possibly deal with that? And how is this Christmas story in Isaiah related to it? I've also mentioned numerous times Ernest Becker, The Denial of Death, who won a Pulitzer Prize, published in 1973, the same year, incidentally, as his death. He was an agnostic, but he was very keen on social theory. And here's what he said: human beings cannot live in the fullest awareness of the meaning of death. If our death is personal extinction, so that when we die there's no continuance, nothing that survives or goes on, and the sun's death is the end of civilization, then everything previous will be totally insignificant to the mass of years and years of dead time before and after, so that no one will be around to remember anything that was done. Now, if that's what death is really like, then no one can truly look it in the face and live with it. If this is truly the way things are, life becomes unlivable. Nothing has meaning. Nothing really matters. Everything is ephemeral. Everything is passing away. So in the past, let me reiterate, what we've said is man tries to cope with this reality of the death cloud that hangs over him. Often we will turn to what we've discussed, and I'll do this quickly because it's not the primary point, but we need to be reminded. Many of us will turn what we termed as the romantic solution. The romantic solution states that the belief that if I can find the one true love, all my feelings of insignificance, purposelessness, and meaninglessness will dissipate. So I am disintegrating, the universe is disintegrating, but if I can find one true love, somehow I can drown out all the noise of the impending doom. If I can just get the girl, if I can just get the guy, my life will have ultimate meaning and purpose. So romance and sex become the path to meaning. But there are other coping mechanisms. For instance, if the romantic solution doesn't work, most of us move to the creative solution. And that means we try to separate ourselves from the herd. We want to be distinct. We want to be different. We want to be valued. We want to know that we can show ourselves and the world that we are a step above and beyond everybody else. Our devil is mediocrity. And our Savior is our unique gifts that will eventually enable us to achieve immortality. We're different from others. We're better than everybody else. We wouldn't say it, but we want to prove to the world that it's true. And this gives us the feeling of being substantial, of having meaning in a meaningless world. That's why we have an entire generation who are addicted to their phones. They're looking for followers. That is their savior. Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, all these platforms I can't keep up with. This is the modern altar of worship, because this is what gives me proof of that I am a step above, that people are interested in my life, that I am significant. When that doesn't work, the romantic solution to the creative solution, we turn to the most popular one, which is the religious solution. The gods of the modern world assist us in our attempt to drown out the noise of death with religious efforts. So we participate in things that we deem are good as we define them. We avoid evil as we define it, in order to prove that if there is something after death, we belong there. So when death is knocking at our door, we say, well, at least I've been a good person. At least I'm going to last. Whatever's next will surely include me. And when you challenge people on their subjective conclusions about God, they come out swinging, because you're not only questioning their idea or worldview, you're questioning their assurance. You're questioning their identity. It is the manner, what they believe religiously about the world. What they believe is the way they have silenced death's constant knock at the door. And if you hold that in view, if you question that, you're questioning their very existence. And the point of all this is, the closer that you and I move to death, the more frantic we get and the deeper we dive into the romantic solution, the creative solution, the religious solution. This is the story of mankind, which is why Becker ends the book by saying, modern man is drinking and drugging himself out of the awareness, or spending time shopping, which is the same thing. Interesting, huh? You're going to have some distraction that blocks out the noise of the reality of death knocking at your door. As modern man's need for heroic dedication has provided less and less by a culture that disbelieves in any moral, spiritual, or social heroism, the same society finds new ways to contrive to help him forget about the reality of death. So again, as modern man's need for heroic dedication has provided less and less by a culture that disbelieves in any moral, spiritual, or social heroism, that same society finds ways to contrive to help him forget. This is the picture of the modern or pluralistic world. Again, you pursue something to drown out the sense of this quiet desperation that we all have. And when you do, one of two things happen. Number one, you get it, but you're still frustrated. Or you get it and you're sad because you know you can't keep it. So quickly, almost done here. The common man pursues wealth because he believes in placing a halo over what is unrealized, that everything will be good. Or once he becomes wealthy and successful, he's even more frustrated because he knows the death cloud is still hanging over him and he can't keep it. Or he pursues something like romance, thinking that if he can find a love in this natural world that will feel like it's a love from eternity, somehow the death cloud will dissipate and his life will have a sense of meaning. And finally, if none of those work, he sits around, or she sits around, philosophizing abstractly about meaning and purpose, never really arriving at any conclusion, and they end up dying in gibbering insanity. Think about the list of philosophers who go insane. Nietzsche, Guy de Maupassant, Otto Weininger, Ludwig Boltzmann. Plato himself said that death should be viewed as an achievement of life. How is death an achievement of life? Aristotle said to never come into existence is best of all, and to die is better than living. This is the ultimate pursuit of philosophy. Higher and higher up the ladder of abstraction, never arriving at any comforting conclusion. Now, here's why we did that work. I find it uncanny that the angels announced the birth of Christ to these three categories. You with me? First, the birth is announced to the shepherd. Nothing is more common than the common shepherd in Jesus' day. They are the blue-collar workers of the East, and the announcement comes to them first. I'm a big James Taylor fan. Many hit songs. But back in the late 70s, he actually wrote a song for a Broadway play called Mill Worker. Actually, I think the name of the play was just Mill. but it was a story about a lady who had to work every day in a mill just to survive. Listen to the words. He writes, "Mill work ain't easy. Mill work ain't hard. Mill work ain't nothing but an awfully boring job. I'm waiting for a daydream to take me through the morning and put me in my coffee break where I can have a sandwich and remember that it's me and my machine for the rest of the morning, for the rest of the afternoon, for the rest of my life." Most men and women live lives of quiet desperation. Monotony is a killer. And somehow in the midst of living in this difficult world of trying to make ends meet in the workaday world, of getting up, working, trying to survive and doing it all over again the same day, somewhere along the line, all of us want to just run away. We want to find a place that we can go. We ask ourselves, what am I ultimately doing? What is the meaning of all this? Does it get better than this? Am I going to do this for the rest of my life? And the reason is that mere work alone is not liberating and does not remedy loneliness, meaninglessness, and purposelessness. Alienation still remains for the blue-collar worker. Second, the news of the birth comes to philosophers. In this case, they're the wise men from the East. In my 30s and 40s, early 40s, I spent a lot of time debating philosophers. And here's the very interesting thing about people who consider themselves to be experts in philosophy. The end goal of philosophy is not to arrive at any answers, but to simply ask the questions. And the more profound the question, the more proud the philosopher. I'm reminded of Professor Nathan at the University of New York when one of his students asked him a simple question. "Professor Nathan, how do I know that I exist?" And Professor Nathan lowered his glasses and answered by saying this, "And whom shall I say is asking?" Whom shall I say is asking? Philosophy gives you no answers. It glorifies in just asking the question. But now here we have these wise men. They're looking for something more objective. A king had been born. They travel this great distance to witness the event. And the question is why? And the best answer is that these men had grown up in a culture that had learned something from the greatest wise men of all, Daniel, during the Babylonian exile. Daniel spoke of the one day coming of Emmanuel, God with us, spoken also about in Isaiah. They would have been very familiar with the story of where Daniel was saved by Yahweh while he was in the lion's den. They would have also been familiar with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where God appeared to them in the fiery furnace. Passed down generation after generation, these wise men came looking for something more than abstract truth. They came looking for something that was objective, and they had hoped to find it in the King, Emmanuel, God with us. The ideologies of our day are not working either. They self-destruct under the weight of object reality. I'm amazed at some of the conversations I still have with the next generation. Now, if you get them on the right side of things, they are amazing people and can do amazing things. But some of the questions I'm asked, I've had people ask me questions like, "Why can't you, Pastor Jeff, live with your truth and me live with mine?" And my response is usually something like this: "Okay, what if my truth is child trafficking?" And that always stumps them. And then they'll say something like, "Well, wait a minute. You can live with your truth as long as it doesn't hurt anybody." And I will say, "Wait a minute. What if my truth is it's okay to hurt somebody?" Philosophy often self-destructs because it's unlivable. You have to have something objective. And these wise men come searching for something. While most philosophers have educated themselves into imbecility, these three wise men are looking for truth. T.S. Eliot said, "Where is the wisdom we've lost in all the knowledge? And where is the life we've lost in all the living?" 2,000 years ago, the philosophers had come to the same sense of nihilism that is evident and prevalent in our culture today. But these particular wise men, they refuse to give up. They want to find objective truth.
You've been listening to Today with Jeff Vines. Thanks for joining us. Next time, we'll bring you the rest of this message from Pastor Jeff.
The third appearance, believe it or not, the news of the birth came to a religious man, a man by the name of Simeon. In chapter 2 of Luke's gospel, in verse 25, there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon who was righteous and devout, someone who's anticipating the Messiah that already gets it, that the gospel is not just for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles.
You can listen to more messages like this Just search for Today with Jeff Vines wherever you get your podcasts.
You make me wanna dance and sing with every single breath I breathe. I will bring this offering. You are my wonder, you bring the wonder.
Today with Jeff Vines.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.